Ladies and gentlemen, we bring you 3 points in the first proposition. We're going to talk about, firstly, alternative streaming as the basis for education, why we think it is the best system generally. Secondly, we're going to talk about how this system of targeting resources efficiently makes for benefits for all learning levels. And thirdly, we're going to talk about how we allow people, through this policy, to focus on their strengths and to excel in their own ways. What are the problems we see facing the education today? We say there are 3. Firstly, in terms of higher achieving students, people who are not challenged or not challenged enough by education, find that they're unable to achieve their full potential and they're not given the resources needed to do so. But secondly, and counter to this, is that underachieving and less swift learners are unable to access the necessary resources to gain the special needs care that require them to become higher achievers and reach those levels that they may want. But thirdly, so we say mechanistically, what do we want to do? Like we say that we want a yearly performance from primary school onwards, based upon largely grades within schools as well as standardized test scores. We think that a synthesis between those is the best system. We say, secondly, that people can easily move between streams. We think that multiple streams allow for people to, in a given year, increase their performance or move down depending on how their learning requires. Thirdly, we'd say that, in terms of number of levels, it doesn't really matter. We'd say it will probably, as in many independent schools, be around 4 or 5. We'd say that these levels will not be year-specific or broad, rather course-specific, in that you can be in the highest level, for example, of math, but a lower level of, say, English language, training. I think that's means of data. I think fourthly, in terms of teaching resources, we think that teacher training under this policy will become similar very much to how it does work with independent schools and with special needs training, in that teaching will be tailored to and teachers will enter into various streaming and thus be specialized towards that. And that's very positive, and I think it's a good thing to do. Let's talk about alternative streaming as a basis for education. We think that education fundamentally is about giving people the tools they need to succeed. Is this a clarification?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Given that we currently have no definitive test for determining what one's abilities are, why is it that tests will not simply correspond to social economic lines as they already do in the present?
We think that when you begin at a very early age, that means that necessarily, a lot of the socioeconomic factors haven't taken root yet, and it actually probably steps, it has to counterbalance to it when those achievements are demonstrated from a very early age. Because it's actually, if that's what you're going to say, we actually correct for that all under this. We say that what is education about? It's about giving people the tools they need to succeed. I mean, that is what we have to do, to give people the environment in which they can achieve their own excellence. The problem with modern education today, where everyone is in the same classroom, is it doesn't tailor that education to the learning speeds of the students. I mean that some people feel left behind, some people feel slowed down, and no one gets the benefits that they need. So we think that what we're talking about is tailored treatment, not meritocracy. That isn't what this is about, and this isn't what this policy is about. It's about allowing people to achieve to their utmost potential. I think that when we use the merit of test scores and grade performance, it is simply a valuable means of sorting people into the learning environments in which they can best achieve and can best accelerate their own learning. I think that is where it all comes in. Let's talk about targeting resources, how we benefit all learning levels. First, let's talk about people who are held back, as it were, by having to go at a slower pace for the other people in the classroom. I think when we can tailor curricula to be faster, to be more rigorous for these students, and have teachers who are more specialized in more rigorous training, you get those students the ability to achieve their full potential. So we give them the tools in that way. Because we think that there's always a problem, oftentimes, particularly in public education, where very high achieving students are unable to, firstly, when they find that they are unable to reach those high levels of achievement, get bored and often opt out or act out within the education. I mean, this is very problematic for particularly fast-moving students in the sense that they fail to reach their own potential because of that. We say that when we give them these tools, we allow these students to actually meaningfully improve themselves in that area. But then, what about slower learners, the people who are slightly, who move at a slower pace, at very slower paces? I mean, that they need that extra attention but in a different way. Because the idea that somehow these students will feel that they are less intelligent and thus inculcate that. We say that that's a problem that currently exists already. Like when you're a student who isn't doing well in the class and can't keep up with the pace, you already feel stupider and inferior to everyone. We say that when you keep inculcating that message and don't give them what they need, all you do is reinforce that forever and cause them more and more so to opt out of that system entirely. When you allow them to move at a pace that is more amenable to them, allow them, to move in a way that permits them to actually engage in that education, it allows them to invest in that and actually achieve their potential, whereas under the current system they never could. Let's say furthermore, when you have teachers who are working within a stream where they don't have to focus either on the average student within the whole spectrum, but rather a much smaller spectrum, it means that their focus is different and less targeted at either the highest achievers or at the mean, which excludes both the highest and lowest achievers. I mean, that necessarily is a good thing in this way as well. But thirdly, finally, how do we allow people to focus on their strengths? Because we think we do live in a world that demands greater and greater specialization from us. Like there are no more polymaths, because of the very reason that no one can do everything. I mean, that when we allow people to focus on what they care about, and to put their resources and time and education into those things, it means they can achieve those things that they wish to do. We say that when a student can stay in, say, the medium level of English and math education, but focus in art class on the highest level, that allows them to achieve that meaningful human potential for themselves and achieve that life that benefits them, rather than forcing them to have to stay at a pace that is not only uncomfortable for them, but takes away from their ability to meaningfully alter their lives in ways that they wish. We think that when we implement this policy, we necessarily allow students to partially tailor their own way in which they experience education. I mean, that's hugely beneficial for those students, for everyone within education. We think we make education better when we move to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, in opposition, we stand for massive investment in public education. We stand for a reform of the public education system along the lines of what South Korea did in the 1990s. We're pouring huge amounts of money into that system to try and genuinely close class gaps and to give all the people in our societies equal opportunity to excellent teaching and to allow them to thrive in environments which are equal, which allow them to interact with peers from different backgrounds and nevertheless to access excellent opportunities. We point out to you that their model does not reform the private school system and we think it's deeply problematic. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is firstly the problems of any sort of testing system to screen learners, particularly from an early age. And then I'm going to talk to you about social harms that this policy introduces in terms of the elite learners and in terms of the class gap. And I'm going to talk about the harms of those left behind, that is, those who are declared to be lower learners from an early age. So let's look first at this notion of test, right? Because we need to recognize that this testing starts early, as the policy tells us, and so relatively few skills are going to have developed, relatively few things are going to be accessible to us at this early age. And so any form of test that we build is going to have to fetishize some set of skills. It's going to have to fetishize one path of development that requires you to know certain things by a certain time. We think that that's deeply problematic for people who develop at different times, partly because of what I'm going to tell you in a moment about how we think that this is going to lead to differences, to widen gaps between students in a way which is artificial and not in fact reflective of the gaps between those students. We also think crucially that the focus on standardized tests allows for parents to learn the tests, allows for parents who see that top stream as being the better stream to focus on it from a particularly early age. They point you to sort of Tiger Mom phenomenon where people send their 1.5-year-old children to tutors in order to get them into the best kinds of schools. We note, crucially, that this is a perception problem which is really hard to get rid of no matter how you sell this to them, because the notion of a child in a remedial education institution is just deeply damaging to the ego of these parents. So this breaks the policy about how well-intentioned it is, because people misunderstand the purpose of these different classifications, and they can and will game the system, right? We note that many of the problems that they highlight to us, like the fact that high-end, high-achieving learners are not well-challenged, poor-achieving learners can't access resources, can be dealt with in holistic environments and are dealt with in holistic environments very successfully. Children are allowed to take additional classes, AP classes, etc. Poorer learners can take extra remedial classes. There are lots of benefits that we're going to be talking to you about keeping them in the same classroom and about socialization. It's about the ability for you to do things like play football with people who are of different streams to you, those kind of bonds that you solely contingent on your ability to do well on the test. You don't think that there is some kind of crucial difference between you and your value as an individual and someone else because of their ability to do tests. So, let's look quickly at the problems at a social level. Because we know there haven't been a sufficient answer to my point of information, no thank you, about the class gap, which is just point of information. Because note here that we can detect the difference that comes about simply from things like middle class parents reading to their children at night. This difference is measurable in the school holiday times. In other words, when children leave public schools in the United States and go home, those whose parents are middle class enough to read to them every night can generate a measurable gap between their performance and their development later than those who do not read, which means that their success across the board in tests precisely like this one is measurable. This means that you are cementing and you are inflating these gaps as opposed to catering for some kind of innate quality. And that's something that we think is just deeply unfair to those children because you elevated to an important status that the current system does not. Yes?
Do you think it's up to the state to facilitate parents who want to bully their children into being something that a child is not to be?
I mean, I don't understand the point of information. I think it's a bad idea that parents do that. I think that your policy facilitates parents doing that by giving them a metric by which they can sort of justify this notion to themselves. So, second problem, we think that it leads to a self-perception of those elite students which is deeply problematic. Because note what this policy does is that it shows you that the world gives you stuff, gives you special status, calls you a high achiever, gives you teachers who have been trained to cater to you and gives you good marks based on things that you didn't achieve, right? I mean, if you sort of got because of an early developmental thing that you have no direct control over. So it leads you to see the world as your oyster in a way that is contingent, not on things that you've been able to do directly, but in a way that just emerges really early in your childhood, and that you're then told a story that you're excellent and you're amazing. That leads to a view of those people who don't succeed as being sort of people who lack agency, who just weren't good enough to make it, who are necessarily worse off than you, that you should be patronizing towards and assist in a manner we think is just dehumanizing to those folks. So, let's talk about harms people who are right? Because recognize that when there's a problem currently because of competition between students, because of the fact that if you compete with someone who's still doing better than you feel bad, what they do is they systematize it, right? They tell students you are in the remedial group, you are in stream 2 or B or whatever you want to call it. And the notion here is simply that the problem is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We can measure when we tell black students, when we make black students read an article about how black students underperform on maths tests and then give them a maths test. Guess what? They underperform on that maths test. This is basically turning it into an organizational principle for your education system. Because you tell certain people that they're good and they get good skills, you tell other people that they're bad, and you give them teachers who teach in only one method. So not only do they scale their expectations down, but we think crucially that they're then locked into one model of teaching. A model of teaching that those teachers have been trained to deal with. So for those kids who do flourish under the sort of aggressive, competitive model that teachers and the top students give, that's great. But for those who would have flourished in that, but through this testing system of yours have not been able to access that system, they are trapped to deal with remedial teachers who may not fit them. The reason we think they may not fit them is because of the problems I told you about the test, because your parents might have forced you to take the test under duress, or they choose it to help you get better scores, or they simply have left you in circumstances where actually you would be stimulated by being with people who do better, because that does in fact happen. We think that that interaction of peer learning and peer support for weaker students is removed by this system. So, what do we tell you? Essentially, we think the problem with their policy is that it takes problems that exist in society and it exacerbates them. By telling certain students that they are good at a really early age, and then by giving them resources which will make them succeed, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that leaves behind another group of children who are, while supposedly given the resources to help them and cater to their needs, that division itself is arbitrary, we think unable to access real problems and unable to cater for real problems like arts, because of the things I've told you about reading, and therefore reinforces educational inequality. So we think this is bad for our society, we think that it harms those children who are left behind at the bottom, and therefore we're very happy to reverse.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about 3 things. I want to talk to you about how this impacts not just overachievers, but also people who find themselves trapped in a position of underachievement within our system. I want to talk to you about how the problem we want to challenge is that of the computerization of attitudes, how this shakes things up and makes it easier for children from all sorts of backgrounds to achieve. Finally, I want to with that of further investment. But he also told you that like introducing more testing and the system we've proposed that plays into the hands of child moms and people who misunderstand the system. We would say to you that the phenomenon that he referred to is going to exist under pretty much any education system that feels like it happens already and happen in the future. That's not what we're here to correct for. What we do need to do is institute a system in which parents can be providing their children no thank you for excelling in their specific fields without having to feel bad that their child isn't particularly good at, say, maths or English. Secondly, we talk to you about socialisation and like how this is negatively impacted. Like we're talking about schools, not gulags. Like children in various different streams and various different classes. Like just because they might not be in the same French class, they're still probably going to be in the same maths class, and they're all going to be playing football together during the break, right? But we also think that the classroom dynamic where children of various different abilities are lumped in together can be particularly poisonous when children who aren't as swift at learning see the teachers favouring and giving like excessive attention and excessive praise to teachers who are to students who are that much quicker with an answer. And so we think that that is what like institutes a harmful dynamic when children are forced to internalise things like this. Like finally we gave you this idea that we're telling children that they're not good. Like ladies and gentlemen, not being as good at maths as someone else is not synonymous with not being good. And that's really what we're trying to tell you on our side of the house. We want to allow children to focus on their strengths rather than forcing them to like break their little hearts on things that they think that they're just not going to be very good at. So now I want to talk to you about overachievers and underachievers. Because the problems we see is that potentially very high achievers are kept in too slow classes that like can't cater to them, and often we see them losing interest and stopping being motivated in trying to press it hard. We also see that the children who are like less quick to learn, that they fall further and further behind. No thank you, because their teachers like can't stop and take the time to explain things to them in a language that they will be able to grasp. And like there's no one invested in helping to talk about parental behaviours. And this tackles a lot directly what Joe brought. Like the problems, as they see it, is that children from disadvantaged and underprivileged backgrounds often aren't offered the same educational opportunities under the current system. And like opening talk to you a little bit about the factors that hold back children from underprivileged backgrounds, what they failed to do was analyse the motivations of these factors. They haven't examined the attitudes of parents. Like wealthy and middle class parents see private education, like yes, as a means to an end, but also as a good in and of itself. Like yes, they're going to reach their children from an earlier age, but that's because like the cultural and social milieu in which they live attaches a positive value to literacy in and of itself. They don't need to see it leading to something good for them to perceive it as good. By contrast, like it's not that people from disadvantaged backgrounds like value education less as a concept. They simply tend to see it as a means for them to achieve the sorts of lives that they want. The consequence of this is that they tend to invest in it later in their children's lives, like in terms of like around 11 plus age, GCSE age, or A levels, rather than in preschool. What this does by instituting the system of competition is it encourages parents to invest in their children from the very beginning when it makes the biggest difference. This effectively closes the gap that they told you was so important between children from different socioeconomic backgrounds, not by telling children that they're simply incapable, but by simply shifting the incentives that parents bear in mind when they decide that when they're going to invest the most in their children's education. And so for all of these reasons, we urge you to work on this.
So at the age of 9, when I was studying in Singapore, everyone in my school was forced to go for a test, so that those of us who were gifted would get into a gifted stream. Now, my school was not a very good school, so not a single person in my school made it into that gifted stream. Now, of course, you heard those usual attitudes that this doesn't judge you, it isn't about who you are, you can change things in life. But we were 9 then, and it doesn't matter to you when you were 9 what the institutions tell you. You feel like you are inferior. You feel like you're going to fail. Because even when you come home, your parents say, don't worry about it, it's alright. You still feel like you've let them down. That is what children see happening in the system. Those messages are incredibly dangerous. We're going to talk about two things today. Firstly, the child's perceptions. One, they're massively mischaracterized. What the actual messages that are telling children, what these actually are. Secondly, the social harms. So don't talk to you a lot about the kind of social economic arbitrary inequalities that they are going to only increase, and they have a very, very disappointing response to that. Firstly, therefore, about the child's expectations. Joe told me that what they do is that from a situation right now where you're in the same class with that friend who's smart and always does better, after that first year, where a child does worse than the other child, you now separate them. So you no longer see that the other friend, right? And what you tell these children is that you can't see them now because they're a bit smarter and they're going to get different kinds of teachers. They're going to get the more interesting books, they're going to get the interesting curriculum that you're not going to have. So the actual comparative is this. Under our situation, at least you're competing within the same classroom. You know that you might be worse than someone else in that same classroom, but that's limited to that limited social sphere. What you do is tell the child that in the grand social scheme you belong to a lower class, a lower stream. So those people you see playing the football field, they're fundamentally different from you because you can't even go to the same French class or the same mathematics class as they can go to. So on the basic level of social interaction, we tell you they make it worse. Furthermore, we tell you often competition is very, very beneficial to these children. They can see people doing better than they want to be insulated from these. Because children don't easily despair just because they're doing worse than someone else, right? With a bit of encouragement from the teacher, it's easy for them to make them put a bit more effort and at least try to match the person who they can look up to in their class. When you tell them that this person is just fundamentally different from you, when you remove those role models in the same lives they lead, you remove the capacity they have to look up to these individuals and improve themselves in a way which is what everything education should be about. Furthermore, we tell you, like they tell us about, that teachers are going to favor some students and not favor others, right? We tell you that's a generic problem that's not going to be eliminated by policy. Because in your policy, surely those teachers in those extra special classes will be telling those students, I'm disappointed in your performance because you know what? This was supposed to be an extra special class. It was not supposed to be getting the same marks as those previous students. I'm disappointed in you. This is not what the streaming was supposed to produce. So on the comparative, you just systematize all those individual instances of bias that already exist within the classroom. You do not help these children ever. I'll take it over.
Given what you said about how teachers' expectations shape children's ability to perform, do you really believe that teachers' encouragement is actually the panacea to the problems that you just had?
It's not a panacea. We acknowledge that some people will always be disappointed, but it's certainly not better than your system where the same teachers will just get to tell the same students in different classes that they are better or worse than people in other classes and use that differential as a way of emotionally manipulating only magnified under your classroom. The second point, therefore, we thank you, social accounts. Now, they told us that tiger moms exist in either side you can't solve for it. Two very obvious differences. Firstly, on the outside, it's more difficult to be a tiger mom because you don't know what exactly those tests are for, and you can't game the system the way parents in many Asian countries do by sending their children for the kind of tuition where you learn nothing but how to game the test. How an MCQ to trade off A, B, C, or D and eliminate them. These are sort of tricks. Thank you. Children from low socio-economic classes simply don't know, and you make it easy for parents to target these tests. But secondly, on an even more obvious level, under your side, the outcomes of tiger moms who pressure their children to doing certain things they don't want to do are greater than the under outside accounts because we no longer systematize them and put them to different streams. There are clever solutions to this. I'm going to say, but you see, you can't just switch streams. Now that falls into the trap we'll talk to you about changing expectations. And that's exactly why the perceptions of children are so important. Because the very moment you tell a child that your capacity is just lesser than a different person, you make the child lower their own expectations to what they demand of themselves. They think that it is a good thing to let children know at a very young age what exactly the limitations are. We do not think it's good to tell a child at that age, you cannot do these things, these are what the limitations are. Because we always want children to struggle against those limitations and to triumph against those limitations. You tell children the opposite thing. For the more we tell you, right, that under constant interaction, they say it's not going to be a ghettoized system, right? Because presumably you can shift views and replace all of these same people. If that is true, if you still have teachers who tell students you are special, you are different, why there is so much more effort into you, or different kinds of effort into you, or curricular to you, all you have then is to just shift the kind of perceptions that children have, and in fact, the negative perceptions, onto those limited arenas of social interaction. So when the kids go and play football, they will say, that guy's from our French class, he belongs to those people who are not that smart, can you not play him each time? Like, he doesn't speak the same way, right? Often because these things already coincide along social economic lines. You merely magnify this more on your arbitrary things. I'll take closing moment. So at the point at which even today, bullying in the playground happens, segregation and cliques happen, you only make it easier for these things to happen when you reinforce that the message that they are just fundamentally different in a way that means that capacities must be accounted for in the system. I'll take closing.
What do you think the effect on a child's education is when he or she is terrified to raise his or her hand in maths class and ask, what does that squiggly symbol mean on the board?
Yeah, at the same time, in your situation, you get teachers telling children, you know what, in this class you do worse, so I'm here to help you. You're still not going to tell children that they're worth the effort. You're not going to make children want to raise their hand and ask questions which they think are embarrassing when they already think less of themselves. In any case, that's an incredibly generic problem that you just solve by having better oversight of teachers, right? And not that they don't make it easier for children to participate in class. It's not sure why that makes even a comparative in this debate in the first place, right? You also tell us, look, what we need to do is to give the people who have more intelligence, more talent, the best things we have. Firstly, this is often just morally arbitrary. It is not sure why we want to organize society along these morally arbitrary lines in the very first place. In this debate, does in fact come down to a comparative between the most commensurate education to a person's needs and between not reinforcing social economic lines. We tell you we would put it along, we would go on the side of not enforcing social economic lines. Because the government not only promises people that they will live in a good society, but they will live in an equal and a fair society. We are given the opportunity to think of ourselves as personal capacity and use resources to meet those capacities. We never said we're removing it. We always have to meet your class, but we got to have aggressive segregation and the messages to children that they will create. For all these reasons, we are very, very proud to
on to how this counteracts prejudice particularly. Because like we admit, we can't direct for parents reading like to their children in summertime. Like yeah, that's kind of a wash on both sides. But how can we correct for the example of like, well, in a larger way? We'd say like from a very, very young age, like it's an exaggeration claim that most parents are going to be putting tutors of 1.5-year-old children or are going to have the finances to do that. So we say that like even if there's a tiny margin left we can, still in a large way, we're eliminating the ability of parents to give their children expensive rides in order to make a particular streaming at a young age. So we say because on our side we don't believe that lower socioeconomic brackets are inherently less good in school. We cut that way through we say that we cut that, we nip that in the bud because we make it possible for parents to invest at that early age. We'd also say class in a more general way. Like young children are now not conditioned into believing in the inferiority or superiority of people within their class bracket. That they're taught that they have to be a high achiever, no thank you, because everyone in their family was before. Instead they go into school, they find out that perhaps they're not hugely academically talented, but there's something that they're really, really good at, no thank you, and that's equally valued within the school. We think that can break the kind of genetic passing on that people believe they should ought to have simply because they belong to a class. We'd also say this is massively helpful with gender. Look at the fact that girls don't choose to study math or science in college simply because society tells them that those things are unfeminine. Standardized testing shows when it's top of mind that girls, without having to identify their gender on the test they're about to sit, actually perform about as well as boys actually. No thank you. We'd say this is far more powerful than simply presenting the results of that research and going, go on girls, study math or science, because it actually at a young age tells them you're just as good as the boy sitting next to you, actually you're better, you're in the top stream. No thank you. So we say that encourages women to get into fields that previously society has blocked them from because they feel that those are masculinized fields. Also, no thank you, Joe himself gave us the example that when black students in the States are asked to identify their race before sending a test, they perform worse. Why is that? Obviously it's not by nature of the test because they are black. It's because they have been told throughout school, no thank you, that black children perform worse tests. If at an extremely young age, before that kind of social conditioning can have taken effect on them, they're told actually they're in the top stream and a bunch of white kids aren't. We say no thank you, that shows that intellect is something that varies completely across race, across class, and across gender boundaries, particularly the kind of alternative subject-based screening that we're talking about. How does this improve education?
The vast majority of my rebuttal will be within that, but I have 2 brief points before we go any further. Firstly, we've had this idea that by allowing children to find out what they're good at a young age, you can equalize things like biases towards boys going into maths and that sort of stuff. Right? Recognize that only, firstly, if people are good when they're first tested at 6, because they screen people at that age, not doing whatever they're good at then, and not allowing for them to develop later in any sort of way there. There's no particular reason why they shouldn't just make maths seem cool, make maths seem like something that girls should want to be doing, with campaigns targeted at girls showing why maths is something that they should be interested in, why maths is something that's cool, and that will get to everybody, and not just to the people who happen to be good at it at the first age of the stream. Then we have this idea of running right down the line. This helps people, because the lowest people can move up the stream. They can get better, and they can surely push towards stream C when they're in stream D. I recognize because they're stream, presumably the lowest stream is going slower than the next stream above it. It's very, very unlikely, unless your standardized test gets something wrong in the beginning, that people are going to be able to move forward, because they're not going to be taught at a pace that gets them any further forward. So you do count them for everyone goes straight there. Right? That's fairly obvious, but they don't seem to get it. So let's talk about the educating experience of people, right? Christine asked in a POI just a moment ago, why don't we make kids wear guns now, right? And they're like, oh, because it doesn't work, right? Why doesn't it work? Because this very public admission and public acknowledgement and recognition of your failure is something which makes you internalize that failure and come to reasons for it because of how bad and how embarrassing that actually is for you. Recognize that policy is almost exactly the same in that it points out who these stupid children are, and that people in the highest stream will be moved down when their grades just don't live up to whatever you thought that they should be. What that means, therefore, is that they are caused huge embarrassment, and they have to internalize that failure and carve out a new identity based upon that failure. You get, therefore, rhetoric and things like, I don't care, I just wasn't trying. Sure, this success just isn't as important to me anymore. This opposite snobbery which you get building up amongst communities where people don't value their education and things like that. What's more is you group all these people together so they can reinforce amongst one another exactly how much learning just doesn't matter to them, because they have to react against that embarrassment and against that public shaming that they felt and that they've internalized as being so bad. That makes it far less likely as well. They're going to see those who wish to succeed. They're going to see those in the classroom who do value their education in that particular subject. So all they see are the ones who reinforce the idea to them that they shouldn't care, that it is alright not to be doing particularly well, that it's alright to be in stream D. Because if you spend your life in stream D thinking it's horrible to be in stream D, you're not going to be able to actually have a very pleasant life whatsoever. So of course they're going to think it's alright to be in stream D, not think they need to work harder. Then they tell us this fantasy stuff about making the intelligent people actually having far better time in school, right? Recognize that education is not about grades. We don't just educate people so that they can come out with a stream of A's, get into college and get a job. There are more reasons why we teach subjects to pupils. In fact, what we're trying to do is inculcate a joy for learning, a joy for the subjects we're teaching to them, and a liking for that subject. It's obviously, even if somebody gets the best grades, right, goes into business and gets the best grades there and gets a business job, it's obviously far better if we instill in them the joy of learning and the joy of business before they do that, because they're going to have a much better life later on if they actually like business and they're going to like that. What they do, however, to the most intelligent children is that they teach them to learn to love competition, they tell us, to learn to love staying in the highest stream, to work to get into the highest stream, to work to stay there, to play the exam system. The exam system is very bad at creating a kind of a joy in students for learning and a joy in students for the subjects that they're learning. So we don't think they're going to make it any better for these children in education, even if they make it they can move faster through the maths book. Go ahead.
Okay, how does forcing a child to spend an inordinate amount of time for a barely passing grade make them love learning when they could be spending their time doing things they do love instead?
Well, presumably they're going to spend the same amount of time in their stream D as the other guys are saying in stream A, unless you've got very weird curriculum or timetables going on there. They're still going to be doing that. But then this idea, right, which says down the line you're going to be getting the thing that you love is definitely going to be the thing that you're stream A in and that you can focus on, right? That's the second thing I want to talk about, right? What they actually do is they cut off avenues to people. How do they do that? Well, because the strengths and interests of individuals develop as they get older. So just because at 5 I does not mean that by the time I'm 10 or 15, my interests won't have developed or my strengths won't have developed. However, if either of those things change under the proposition, if I do get much more interested in something like languages, I now have been learning at such a slower rate compared to the other people that I can't develop an interest in that. In fact, they've already told me that I shouldn't focus on languages, that I shouldn't be interested in that, and that I should stick to whatever I'm good at, and I should love that, right? That's presuming that everybody has something they're going to be falling in stream A in, and not just that the same children will be falling in stream A all the time, which is probably more likely under their proposition. So those avenues are cut off to people because they're stuck in the streams they were originally placed in. Education as an equalizer then. There are very many things that can affect your development early on. Those could be things like parental advantages, as the first opposition you talked about. It's not just these kinds of tiger moms, which is a phrase I've never heard before, but it's kind of amusing to the pop or something. But it's things like just having work ethic and a joy for education within your family. All those sorts of things which can give you a very early head start. Or even just the way that different people develop at different stages, right? However, what education is particularly in our society, is a way to make sure that we get rid of that arbitrariness of how other people develop and whoever their parents are, so that they can, once they go out into society, get whatever they deserve and achieve whatever they can, whatever their best way to achieve with their lives. Therefore, we should not be tied to how we develop as individuals at the time that we're developing. We should not be tied to who our parents are when we were born. With education to be an equalizer, so everybody should learn at the same pace for the same exam, so that we come out on the same footing and with the same level of knowledge, even with the same access to the same level of knowledge, and not with some people racing away and getting a head start in life which we can never catch up on and move to a close.
Madam Speaker, I have to wear the gun hat. It didn't turn out.
Right, so I want to do three things here. First of all, I want to look at the extension that we got from Mark and Christine. Secondly, I want to look at the deconstruction of social conditioning that so heavily is pervasive within the education system. Lastly, I want to look at does this benefit the groups of kids who are actually streamlined. Okay, but first of all, let's examine a few areas. Okay, first the concept of moving between streams. Like if they're performing better or worse than the other kids within their stream in a comparative way, comparing one against the other, then we can discuss about whether or not they would be able to move streams. It doesn't matter that the lower stream is moving slower than the one above it. It's how they're performing against the other people within their stream. Like then we can see if we're able to provide them with more attention to move streams. We think that solves for that. But then we got the idea of we'll just make science more attractive to girls. Like when you're finished with your magic hammer, just smash the patriarchy with it too. Like there's not more than a few attempts to actually change the situation surrounding women and subjects like engineering, like science. We think they've all failed thus far. We think this is the better one. Okay, so let's talk about the education experience. Because Mark likes to claim that education isn't all about grades, and all the harms that he links directly back to us are based on the fact that these kids are going to have poorer grades. Like we think there's a bit of a tension there when he tries to make that. Like what we do is enable these kids to do what they love and are more able to do. Like he assumes it's stupid for stupid sakes, but we think that when we provide them with alternatives like this, like in lower streams, we think we can find what they are able to do and what they might like to. But then Mark goes on to a second idea of claiming avenues of experience. And all the ones that he highlights are linked to academics. He laments that the academic avenue has been put off in this instance. This is the exact pedestalization of academics that Sally talks to you about. We think this is incredibly harmful to these young kids when they're told that if they don't get something that's like academia, they're an absolute failure. We think that's where they fall down on their side. We think when we present kids with a new framework of learning, one that doesn't always have to end in what the value of X is, we think we engender them to learning in a more positive way, even though it might not be the academic subjects that Mark thinks are so important. Because I asked Ashish in a point of information, why is it so hard to ask that question? And he laughed it off. We think it's so hard to ask that question, and when you make that experience, it makes you hate education because you're made to feel stupid, because you're in something that you cannot handle. That's why we think that's so harmful. That's what we don't buy. What comes out of those words? No thank you. Alright, let's talk about deconstruction of social conditions. Sally gives you the analysis which really isn't responded to as to why performance in the education system is not alone based on the ability. We point to marginalised groups within societies and others that I'll discuss, such as African American communities and Hispanics within the US. We point to lower levels of achievement
within working class groups, although talent is normally distributed throughout the population. I think that's a problem there. So let's look at marginalized groups. We think, like, in terms of like one of the examples of these social stigmas, like for ethnic minorities, we think it's a serious problem when African Americans perform poorer in tests when they have to reveal their ethnicity. Like, Joe highlights this in their own speech. He says, like, it's a harm if we put them into testing because they'll do worse. We think this is a way to actually break this down. How are we going to do this? Because the perception exists within society that this group is simply less intelligent than their white counterparts. Members of these groups, like, disproportionately hold less positions that are considered intelligent. You think, like, first of all, when you base a group's importance on its ability to hold academic and intelligent positions, you undermine it. But just in terms of this policy, this attitude is then internalized by members of these groups as they are exposed to it so frequently and to such an extent. I'll take Joe in a minute. Like, this policy enables us to prevent this harmful and pervasive attitude taking hold of these communities at large. Like, we enable these kids to see their ability regardless of their ethnicity or what the societal perception surrounding their ethnicity or particular group is. We think we make it not matter. Like, I think this goes a long way of breaking that attitude at large. First of all, on behalf of those who hold it and like those who internalize it. Seeing members of these particular groups who are just as good and intelligent as anyone else at like academic subjects, at maths and engineering. Like, we think the same analysis holds for women in terms of their relation to certain fields, such as engineering, such as science. We think we're able to break that down. Joe.
Given the class and race are incarnate, and given the point I made about reading shall you conceive, how do black kids feel when they slip from year to year down the grades because their parents don't read to them in the holidays? How does that make them feel about their ability to perform?
Like, we think, like, first of all, like, what you claim that is, we think is particularly short term. We think when we enact this policy, we're able to get quite rapid results quite fast. Like, maybe not on the massive scales that we'll get long term, but we'll prove that, like, kids within these communities are as intelligent as their counterparts in other things. Like, we think, like, when like parents can see that the education system isn't an actual loss on their kids, when they see that they are able to achieve the same as anybody else's kids, we think then that might engender a greater interest from those parents. Like, we think that's completely plausible. We think when you show people are capable of doing this, you get people interested in what they can actually achieve. Like, in terms of class, like, we get no response to society's analysis of this. Like, as I said, given that the talent is distributed normally throughout the population, we see swathes of it wasted in the lower classes. We think this is particularly harmful because they, in turn, internalize the attitude that they are one that cannot compete with other people on any given level. We think that's particularly bad. We think that's able to solve for this here. Like, last week, I want to talk to you about, does this benefit the different groups of kids? Like, those who aren't in the high streets, what happens to them? Like, the system at present necessarily harms those that aren't among the smartest. Like, these guys want to blame, like, poor teachers, as she's trying to do when I asked them that point of information. But the atmosphere that is created by being inferior and having no escape from that scenario of being inferior when you are consistently compared with the others within your class, like, makes you want to back away from the learning process. You feel that it is hostile to you, it doesn't cater for your needs, and quite often, because you're not the most interesting in the class, because you're not the one who shows the most ability, you do not get the attention that you need to actually engender yourself to the concept of learning. And we think this flies in the face of Mark's analysis when he says that those in the lower stream start to hate it. We think when what they're learning is tailored to them, when it's something that they are able to achieve, when it's something that they don't have to consistently worry about feeling like a fool next to the smartest person who is now removed from them, we think that's incredibly beneficial to these kids. We think it engenders a love of learning, seeing how there are ways that they can achieve, ways that they can feel that they are as good as those in the higher streams. Well, all that, we beg to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk to you about educational experiences, about why it's not just about grades, and why education is an equalizer which they sacrifice. Before I do that, 3 points of rebuttal. First, they tell you about moving between streams. For the first at least half of this debate, that was not a relative system, that was introduced by Adam. What a relative system would mean is that regardless of your actual performance in the stream, the worst kids in the top stream, which is still better than the rest of the kids, would move down. That would make your policy fail, so it seems strange that you would suggest that. If that's not the case, as it wasn't when the first half happened, then a standardized test will mean the more you learn in your quicker moving classes, means
They tell you essentially that there's not enough women going into these careers. I mean, Mark tells you there's plausible alternatives you could take because all their policy does is mean that maybe the top women who are put in the top stream will go into these careers. That's already the case because those people do see a place for themselves within these fields. The only thing is it still fails the vast majority because that's how averages work. Most people are below average in a lower stream and don't feel that's for them. The difference is that that's a policy introduced far too soon. Second, they tell you that Hispanics and blacks are currently told that they are less intelligent than white communities. Standardized tests, as they tell you as well, prove that they do worse. That's not because they're less smart, no one thinks that. It's because they have been denied educational opportunities in the past, as have their parents. That's why everything that's already been talked about, everything that means they won't be able to do as well in these tests, everything like their parents not having seen them be a position for them in education, everything like them not having access to reading materials or have the same interest, mean they're likely to do worse. They tell you, well, it means these parents have an incentive to start preparing their kids earlier. That's relative. Surely their parents should be doing that anyway. They're not. There's no reason to suggest they will start to massively care now. And third, Adam tells us it's so unfair of us to prioritise academia when you like an education system. So I would suggest we'll prioritise education, yes. But unless they're introducing a curriculum where if you're not good at either science or maths or English, you take a class in carpentry, then that doesn't change anything. And if they want to introduce that, that's worse because you write those people off. So what they've done is assume that everyone has at least one talent within school, and they haven't told us why that's the case. Many people simply just aren't academic, and those people are making you feel worse. Actually, I don't know.
Do you think it's bad when you describe someone who might like a class in carpentry as written off?
Well, when you were told age 6 that that is all you can be destined for because there's no place for you in the top stream of anything else, but maybe this will be your interest, then that might be how they take it. The difference is when you continue to provide opportunities, they can decide for themselves when they're older and not have the school do that for them. Educational experiences. Well, first, as Mark tells you, and as they don't particularly give like the best possible answer to, we say that if you're publicly recognised as failing, then you aren't necessarily going to keep trying hard, and aren't going to come back and try to ask the questions that move you up the ranks. First, because of the stuff we tell you about and it's unlikely you'll do so, but also because it is just as embarrassing to sit in the stream E and ask a question that other people might think is stupid. You are still likely to be worried about your question being taken that way, either way. The only difference is that there's nothing else you can do in that stream because all of you are together and all of you have to pretend it's not a failure, that you weren't trying. And that's embarrassing for individuals who say you are showing that they're trying because those people might fail again. And that's what people are worried about. That's why you get things like rebellion that Mark tells you about. Because you have a choice to be defined by the fact that you're in stream D for a lot of things, or to pretend that that's cool with you, and that's not something you care about. If you don't try, you don't move upwards, so we don't think that's good enough. Why is it not just about learning? No thanks. Well, because if the joy of learning isn't something you actually learn about, if all you want is to do the best in your class, then it doesn't matter because most people won't succeed. When you go into business, you're not going to be there, you won't enjoy your job, all you'll know is that was the one thing you're good at, so you may as well stick at it. We would much prefer to have these questions like that people questioning and becoming involved in classrooms, not just to base it around an exam system that means most people lose out even when they win in schools. They're not doing something that they necessarily enjoy. If you happen to be good at maths, I suppose you stick at it, because that's where you can prove yourself in school. It doesn't mean it's something you should want to take the rest of your life around, nor does it mean people won't realise that was wrong age 16. But by that point, have put in more work into the things they told you you should put more work into, the things you were naturally good at. Education is the equaliser. Because the thing is, the parental advantage exists at the moment. That's why we want to make sure that there is a policy that we won't be leaving you behind again if you didn't get lucky with the parents that you have. The difference is, if you don't get things, like first half, do a good job in telling me stuff like, if your parents don't care, then you won't get ahead. But if you don't happen to have a family with work ethic, either, as Mark says, if your background happens to not be particularly academic, if you don't have experience of the system, or if you're worried about the tiger mums, whether or not they exist even, those things are more likely to edge you out. And it means that you're worried that you can't get that equalising opportunity. And it's true, because they're not offering you that equalising opportunity. They're saying if you learn to read fastest, you'll be pushed ahead, you'll keep being pushed ahead. You no longer get the same access to knowledge that we have and that we think is a much better priority of school systems, to make sure that we are in it together with everyone, that we won't simply leave other children to take it as they will and hope that they're simply encouraged by the system. If you know you all did the same curriculum and you know you all have the same opportunities, you can go into it and know the test you see is what you've all learned about together. That's not the case when you know you're at a huge disadvantage and you never covered that bit. You You might understand the basics, but you never got around to that.